Hey guys, I know this is about a week or so late, but you know how first 2 weeks of the semester are for college. I had some class disputes. So I basically hauled butt all day yesterday because I didn't want to get any more behind with these reviews than I was already. So I basically pulled an all-nighter finishing up RPM to get this review out today so I can finally move on from this season. So without further ado, let's move on. You're louder than I remember. I was going to use the team card, I was too lazy to get it. And just because I forgot to do this last week, or whenever. I didn't have Andros' card on me when I decided to do this. In case you wanted to see Ashley's card. Man, I wish they'd bring out more in space cards so I can make a deck with them. I still need to talk about the card game. Okay. So, when I decided to get back into Power Rangers, I asked a lot of my friends, well, I haven't seen Wild Force through Samurai. Which season should I start on? All my friends immediately said, watch RPM, it's so good. You liked In Space and Time Force, right? I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? So they're like, go watch it now. It's worth your time. It's one of the best seasons you'll ever watch. So the first thing I did was hunt down where I could find the season, and I watched it. Needless to say, it's not what I expected at all. So, after rewatching In Space, I wanted to rewatch RPM again for a few reasons. One, to refresh it in my mind. Two, because there's a few compare and contrast I want to make between In Space and RPM. One should be fairly obvious, and if it's not obvious, then I'll definitely point it out as when I get to it. So, RPM is definitely a different season than some of the rest are because it's really, really dark, and it even starts off as so. Even in the beginning of the theme song. Basically, the whole setting of RPM is the world has been taken over by an evil computer virus named Vengex, who ended up destroying I'm going to assume about like 98% of the world population. Made robotic soldiers and everything to take everything over, and the remaining humans went to a dome city named Corinth that'll shield off the outside, keeping them safe. Okay, so we've already got a really dark setting here. There's probably about, I want to say, 1,000,000 some odd people left in the world, and they're all inside this dome, and outside that dome is the end of the world. So this is already a different setting than any other Power Ranger season we've had before. And it's a really, really good approach because it's taken a leap forward. None of the Power Ranger seasons have actually implied that a mass amount of people died. Now, we have had some hints of death in Power Rangers before, like, well, not hints in form of Lost Galaxy with Kendrix actually dying on screen, which is still really, really odd compared to how some of the other seasons handle it. You could hint at maybe some people died during Countdown to Destruction and Fate of Lightspeed, but they never actually said or shown it, so we know people died here. The season starts off with a dude in a black car driving around through a barren wasteland trying to find the city to Corinth. He ends up pulling over to fight off the Goonies of the season called Grinders. He gets ambushed by a little twitchy dude named Ziggy. I like Ziggy. Ziggy's cool. His name is cool. He says he's trying to find his way to Corinth also, so he ends up hitchhiking with this guy who doesn't know his name, doesn't know where he's from, doesn't know who he is at all. So he ends up calling himself Dylan. So this is what we know him for as for the rest of the season. I think that's his permanent name from here on out. They go to Corinth. They end up running up against a Vengeance barricade that he set up, trying to take down anybody who's trying to get into Corinth. They managed to get around it. The Commander Truman, who's the person in charge of the Corinth military, lets their shields down to let them in, and they're invaded by Vengeance machines, and the Rangers intercept them. We're introduced to, I'm going to call them like how they're called in the season, Ranger Red, Ranger Blue, and Ranger Yellow. They end up fending off the attacking robots fairly well. Ziggy is like, Power Rangers, they're Power Rangers. After the monster's destroyed, some of the military people scan Dylan and say that he has Vengeance technology inside of him, so they arrest him and Ziggy because Ziggy was with them. And that kind of fits with Ziggy's character because he's the loser that has bad luck all the time. We'll see that later as it's a part of his character. So they end up getting put in prison, and they're trying to figure out what Dylan is. Now, Dr. K, who is the person behind all of the Ranger technology, says they need someone for the Ranger Black suit. Summer likes what she sees in Dylan. Summer is Ranger Yellow, and tries to talk Flynn Blue and Scott Red into having him become Ranger Black. They said that that would be his way of getting out of prison. So Dylan accepts, only on the terms of if he lets Ziggy out of prison. So it works. They get Ziggy out of prison. Dylan makes his good first impressions, fighting off a lot of drones all by himself. So now we need to find Ranger Green. Ziggy does what Ziggy does, and does like this really, really weird American Idol style tryout, where a bunch of loonies come up and like, what the heck is a freaking ventriloquist gonna do as a ranger? Go figure, Ziggy. So Scott begins to question if what he's doing is really gonna work. So Ziggy's like, okay, I'm gonna go out and find somebody. He walks outside and he runs up against this guy named, was it something Bob? I can't remember his name. I'm just gonna call him Soprano Bob because he's a gangster. He knows Ziggy, and Ziggy knows him. So this girl comes out of nowhere and beats them up for him. Ziggy says, "You're the kind of person we're looking for," and brings her in. The Rangers test her and say, "Oh, she's perfect. So let's give her the green morpher." Dr. K gives it to her and tells Ziggy to protect it with his life. Don't make sure it falls in the wrong hands. They scan, the security people for Corinth scan her and say, "Oh, there's something wrong with my scanner. It's been giving off false readings during this event the entire day." That's actually foreshadowing, and really good attention to detail by the writers by doing that. One of them sees like a chip on her back of her neck. She's a Vengex robot named Tanaya 7. She's a robot with humanoid features. Her mission was to get the green morpher so she can infiltrate the Rangers and break them down from the inside. She doesn't quite... She thinks she has the morpher, but Ziggy runs off with it, leading her to... I think his name was Frisco Bob. I'm just going to call him Bob because that name is so simple and easy to remember. He gives the bag where he put the morpher in to Bob, and Tanaya beats them up thinking that she can get it, but Ziggy has it. Dylan comes to help him out, but Tanaya tosses Dylan around, gets to Ziggy. He puts the morpher on himself and turns into Ranger Green. This kind of ticks off Dr. K a lot because he's not qualified to be a ranger physically and stuff. So she gets really, really upset at him for it. Understandably so, because, well, all the other Rangers were tested. Dylan was tested. Scott, he just puts it on against her will. So now we have 4 Rangers who are qualified and one dude who, he gets better. Trust me. The next episode is kind of funny because Tanai ends up latching her hand onto Scott's car and she has like a robotic hand infiltrate their base. Dylan in this episode ends up getting annoyed with Dr. K because she hides behind him and doesn't really treat them as humans but treats them as weapons. So at the end of the episode we get introduced to Dr. K, who's been hiding behind a computer monitor the whole time, and she ends up being like almost a teenage girl in a school uniform. Go figure, huh? Definitely not what I expected when I saw her. So after this we get like a few episodes of backstory for each character. We learn what every character went through to get here. Ziggy, Ranger Green, was a member of a mob gang who ended up not... He ended up betraying the mobsters for a good cause. He had to bring in a truck full of vaccine and stuff, and instead of bringing it to where he needed to bring it to, he brought it to an orphanage full of sick kids. They thought he took it for himself to get the money, which wasn't the case. So Ziggy was a good person in the wrong place. Scott, you know what? I'll save this for character development. I'll save this when I talk about the characters. Well, I'm going to jump to Dr. K's episode because it's really, really interesting. Because it has to do with the story of the season. She was, I want to say abducted, but taken in by this military program called Alphabet Soup, which is really a demented place. Apparently it's a government-run school, I guess. They never really explain what it's supposed to be other than it's a government-run organization who raises up special children, and by special I mean really, really intelligent. She just kind of gets abused here because she never gets to go outside. She's lied to that the outdoors are harmful to her. They keep making her do equations, make programs for them, makes machines for them. She ends up starting on this program called the Ranger program to link into this thing called a biofield and fuel these suits off of the energy. She also creates the virus called Vengex. Dun dun dun. The Fiend is revealed. She shows it off to try to hack into a military program, trying to find out what Alphabet Soup was all about. When she meets up with her 2 friends, Jim and Gemma, who we'll see later, she reveals it to them, and the head people at Alphabet Soup end up taking them away. They won't let her install the program that would seal Vengex in time, so Vengex ends up getting loose and going haywire. Okay. Alphabet Soup is a really screwed up place if you actually sit down and think about it. Like it should have been considered illegal because it's like putting people in prison, right? A prison school? I don't know. So there's a robot in the next episode when we get back to the actual story that has Dylan's memories on it because he's been having nightmares about his old memories per se. So he finds this robot that was in his dream. He tries to hunt it down because it has his memories in it. They end up having to... Let me see if I'm... Yeah. He ends up having to blow it up anyway. Because they have no choice. The thing was going to disrupt the shield around the city. Dr. K ends up scanning Dylan to see if they could find his dreams in there, but instead she finds the Vengex virus is inside of his robotics, slowly taking him over. And when it gets to a certain percentage, Vengex could activate him and turn him into a Vengex drone. Oh man, we got intensity here now, don't we? We got a chance to have a backwards Dragon Ranger and a backwards Titanium Ranger, and holy crap, this should end up turning into a good story later on down the season, huh? Right? I mean, I hope they don't let me down with this. Right? Oh. So, they have to go fight Tanaya again. She ends up putting something on Dylan's back. It's a chip. The chip kind of puts Dylan under mind control to put him inside the base and take the shield down. They end up getting the chip off of him, and they find out that the thing increased the speed at which the virus was, accelerating. He ends up slowly losing his mind to this. And they ended up snapping him out of it after a few bursts to his head. I'm trying to read what happened. I don't remember much from this episode for some reason. He knows where he can go to find. He wants to leave the city to find out more about himself, but Scott won't let him go. They have a robot that'll break into Corinth's shield systems, and they said the only way they can shut it down is with a code of the Vengex virus to hack into it and bring it down. Well, Dr. K puts in the code and brings the robot down. She then reveals to the other Rangers that she was the one that made the Vengex virus. This kind of stuns all the other Rangers for a good reason. Because now they know that their creator is also the creator of the thing they're fighting for. So Dylan says, in my dream I found this place. I found the sign of a city called near Omega City. So they decide to go out and try to find it in a van that has the Go Onger name on it. They make a reference to Go Onger here. That's one thing I will give RPM though. They do take a lot of shots at not only RPM, but Go Onger, but Power Rangers and Sentai in general. I'll get to that in my post stuff. Because I actually really enjoy those little shots at the series as a whole. On their way out there, though, Vengex has practically gotten sick of everything blowing up in his face, so he ends up making a body for himself, and he goes out and confronts the Rangers himself. Not too shabby, Vengex, not too shabby. He ends up sending out these upgraded grinders that they can't really beat. So while they're getting wrecked, practically, they ended up getting saved by a chicken copter and a tiger jet as Vengex is chasing them down, and after they attack Vengex with Zenith and Megazord, which is Engine OG6, if you don't know name from name between series. And they fly away again after being saved, and the Rangers are trying to figure out who these people were. Well, next episode they get to the city, and Dr. K is studying the chip a little bit more. She finds out that the memories he had about this place were implanted into his neck along with the mind control thing, so it was a trap. Vengex ends up coming back again with another robot, and then Gold and Silver come in. These guys are really really creepy at first because they're like finishing each other's sentences, but they're really powerful. They end up blowing this robot up. They end up taking him back to Dr. K, and Dr. K knows them because in the flashback character episode for her, they were there when she introduced the Vengex virus. So now Scott has a problem to make here. Because Jim and Jim are really childish. But they do bring up a good point. They need to go on the offensive because Vengex keeps defend the city. Truman's like, defend the city. It's been what we've been doing. It's what we need to keep doing. But Scott's like, these two clowns have a point. We need to go on the offensive now. Okay, his dad, once again, kind of is a jerk to him because, well, I'll get to that later when I get to it. They want to go blow up a certain... Let's see if I remember this episode right. Sorry if I'm seeming really derpy right now. I'm trying to make sure I get this right. Yeah, Alright, there's an outpost outside the city, and Jim wanted to go blow it up. Scott heads out with them, and they end up finding out that because of Tanaya breaking their oxygen tanks, they had to permanently put the shield up at full power to fix it before they could open and close it again. But the Vengex's drones built a tunnel underneath and had a vacuum monster suck out the oxygen when they put their shields up. So they had the other Rangers get out through a access port, and they end up blowing everything up, saving the day, yada yada yada. So now, during an attack, oh yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Jem and Gemma start singing a song, like they're whistling a song, and Dylan recognizes it. Says, that song sounds really familiar to me. It's like, yeah, there was a girl in our cell next to us at this prison camp we were trapped in. She said it had belonged to like a locket her brother had. He shows the lock and says, that girl's your sister. So now we know Dylan has a sister. Okay. So they go to this factory, A, to save the people, B, because Jim and Jim want to blow it up because they have an explosion fetish, and 3, Dylan wants to find a sister and learn more about his past that way. Well, they get there, Summer and Dylan end up downloading information, which Dr. K finds out that Vengex is making a doomsday weapon. So they go back out there to rescue everybody and blow the place to bits. Dr. K, with this information, ends up thinking, you know what? I've got a way to turn this thing against Vengex. So they end up letting the thing go. She uploads a code to the war machine, turning it to their side. Summer ends up finding a little key thing that fits with his locket. So he's making progress. He's finding something, which is good, right? He doesn't know where to look. No, there's another episode here that's all about Scott. Scott's got daddy problems. I'll talk about this when we get to it. But he ends up leaving the city because Jim got a medal instead of Scott during a mission. He ends up saving some rescued, some captured civilians and brings them in. And then Vengex goes on the offensive in a new body because his first body was destroyed a couple times already. So he comes out with a new powered-up body, and Scott ends up killing him front on. So Vengex at this point has already lost 3 bodies, per se. One of them kind of the same model. The next episode we get introduced to a Zord that Flynn makes. I'm going to save this for when I talk about the characters. There's another episode here that I want to talk about too. It's called Dome Dolls. It's an episode where a gas is released that knocks out all the males, and it's an all-female episode. What bugs me about this episode, though, is that there was an episode similar to this in Go Oncher, where the males got knocked out, and it came down to Go on Yellow, Go on Silver, and Bearer V in the wheel thing. I forgot what that thing was called in Go Oncher. But this episode really strikes me odd because it's the same idea, but Dr. K ends up waking up the men in enough time for the men to help the women out. But in Go Oncher, the women are the ones that end up saving the day and getting the antidote stuff. And I felt like this episode was handled much, much better in Go Oncher for the fact that the girls actually did it themselves. Then there's a very random episode here that's like a behind the scenes episode that they just randomly threw in there. Like they show the wire work, what the explosions are like, all this stuff just randomly thrown in here near the end of the season. It doesn't make any sense as to why it's there. It seems like, why put a behind the scene, make that a special for a DVD set, not an actual episode of the show, because it does nothing for the season. So Tanaya ends up finding the ruins of Alphabet Soup and downloads something from a program saying, oh look, there's a weapon in a mountain region in the side of the city that we need to go find something. So they go find it, and it ends up being awoke, and it turns out it's Ranger Zords that were based off of extinct species, so it's really hard to control. Dr. K gets a hold of it long enough to turn it into a weapon for the Rangers. But this episode is really weird for the same thing, though. The same thing that Tanias actually, getting my facts confused here. Some of the officers found a circuit board or something. They brought it to Truman. He ends up scanning it, and it's a video of Dr. K talking to Vengex. He ends up watching this enough to find out that she's the one that created Vengex. So he goes to arrest Dr. K for all of this. Now I have a few questions about your decision making here, stupid. One, it's already too late to arrest her for this. The damage is done. Two, you know good and well that she's the one who's in charge of keeping the Rangers' equipment underway, helping them put the Megazord together, and all this stuff. So you're going to arrest her anyway, knowing that it'll handicap the human race's only line of defense against Vengex. You really deserve your position. It takes almost the entire episode until Dr. K says, we need to put the past behind and work to a better future, for him to realize that, maybe doing this is a stupid idea. And this will go to my point that Commander Truman is kind of an idiot. Dylan sees Truman and someone put together a key to open up a thing, to open up a new facility. He thinks, well, maybe my key will go with this key and open the lock. It does. The song that is played unlocks a new memory for him. So he ends up leaving the city at this point, which, at about this point of the season, I think they completely forget about the shield around the city, because it seems like robots are entering and leaving, Rangers are leaving and entering at will without anybody throwing up an arm. And I'll bring that up. I'll go into that a little bit more later because there's an episode that'll really drive that home about why they completely toss out a window. He gets ambushed by Tanaya and he says, Tanaya, you're my sister. He plays the song and ends up kicking memories into her head. Now, haven't we seen something like this before? This seems oddly familiar to something else we just talked about a couple weeks ago. She doesn't buy it. She ends up attacking him and runs away after saying, oh, I'm completely machine. Oh, you're bleeding now. So this puts her into shock and she runs off. She comes back later saying, okay, I believe you. Because she did a DNA scan. Her DNA matched someone who's related to Dylan, and she believed him. So she's like, okay, I believe you. I want to help. So there's this monster here that's tapping into the biofield of the Rangers, and she's like, I know a way I can shut it down. So she gets a code which ends up weakening the machine and blows it to pieces, which is a robot that was set loose because Shifter, who was one of Venjex's things, was kicked off because Tanaya sabotaged it. So now we got internal struggles among the villains. That's always fun. We also get introduced to a new general called Kilobyte here, who's one of Venjex's top men. He's really sexist, by the way. Really sexist. And he's always on Tanaya's back about things because he doesn't trust her. And now that she's kind of a spy against Venjex now, it really puts his suspicions up there. Not Kilobytes, but a Shifter's robot gets hacked into and gets shut down and gets blown up by the Rangers, but Kilobyte ends up kidnapping Tanaya, and they end up reprogramming her to be more loyal to Venjex again. Seriously, have we not seen something like this before? This sounds really, really familiar, and it's kind of bugging me. Ziggy gets some things cleared up with the mobsters. He ends up saving them from Tanai after a few events and stuff. Now, Venjex, there's a clip show here too, where Ziggy teleports Kay and then himself underground, and the Rangers have to figure out how to unlock her program to refuel his morpher. It's just a clip show. Nothing too special happens here, but it is a development episode for Dr. K. Episode here called Endgame, where Kilobyte feels like he's losing his trust with Venjex, so he runs into the city and activates a thing called a hybrid, which is a sleeping machine/human thing, and it ends up attacking Commander Truman. So now Venjex is mad because of this. And they end up scanning some of the city, and they realize that there's a whole bunch of these hybrids running around the city. So because of this, Venjex calls an all-endgame scenario. Dylan is slowly falling to the virus because the virus has taken over more than half of his body at this point. So they send out a wave that wakes up all of the hybrids, and Dylan starts to lose his mind because of it. Ziggy knows that Venjex isn't here, so he runs to try to save her. Dylan heads to the lab to try to get the virus that Dr. K's been working on for this illness, for this virus takeover. And the other Rangers try to fend off some of the monsters that's on the ambush. Venjex breaks into Dr. K's lab, takes her and Ziggy hostage. She downloads the information of the biofield for the Rangers, destroys the lab, and walks off as Dylan gets there. He takes the antidote right as the virus has taken him over. Oy. I'll talk about that in a little bit too, because I feel like this was a missed opportunity for something. So now Venjex can access the biofield and delete things as he pleases. He does so by deleting the Paleomax Megazord. he ends up deleting Gem and Gemma and their Megazords too. So now we've lost 2 Rangers and 2 Megazords entirely. This puts everybody on panic's edge. Their idea is to create a virus stronger than Vengex and use it to counter Vengex. Dylan freed Tanaya in the episode before, killing Kilobai in the process. He ends up getting put into shock, so he's like out cold because the Vengex things are rebooting inside of him. Tanaya's like, I'll upload this virus to the server so when Vengex activates it again, it'll end up backfiring on him. Dr. Kane's deleting all the grinders and somehow makes Gem and Gemma come back to life. Apparently you can do that. They end up blowing the tower up, the little central tower, and have it end up crashing on Vengex, killing him, supposedly. And with that is that, the outside world begins to revive itself, and everything ends happy except you see the Vengex light in Ranger Red's morph, and the season supposedly ends on a cliffhanger, which has led a lot of people to say maybe the Go Busters adaptation would be a good follow-up season to RPM. They probably won't do it, and I think the odds are against it because you know how Saban and Disney were with this kind of stuff. They don't like trying to keep continuity up, except for Dino Thunder. I'll get to Dino Thunder later. So, there's a few things I like about the season, a few things I'm indifferent to, and there's a lot of things that bug me here. I'm going to start off with the things that bug me first, and I'm going to go back to the city shield, the dome shield, that they keep having to raise and lower to let people in and out and stuff. During the beginning part of the season, it was kind of like a big decision to let the shield drop, to let people out and back in, because it was a security risk. They were threatening letting Vengex monsters come in, even though Vengex seemingly found ways around the shield anyway. So the shield was seeming kind of pointless, but as the season went on, they seemed to have dropped it. And dropped it to the extent where like it wasn't even a thing anymore. I'm going to go into that episode where Jim got the medal from his dad, not Scott. He left the city out of butthurt, and the only way he could do that was to lower the shield. His dad, Commander Truman, is the one in charge of letting the shield up and down. But he didn't know that Scott left willy-nilly. Apparently they just completely dropped this idea about halfway through the season. I heard that they ended up changing writers or something about halfway, or something in the production staff changed about halfway through the season or something. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know, but then this ends up bringing up questions because now Vengex and his people are just like walking in, walking out, and there's no sense of security breach. They're just like, oh, there's like some weird activity going on over here. What about the shield? Why is it not keeping these things out anymore? Like, seriously, now I'm just like, what's the point of establishing a shield if you're just going to completely toss it out of the story halfway through? It makes me raise an eyebrow. And then as for the whole Dylan Tanaya thing, if you haven't caught on to me hinting here, this is almost an exact copy and paste of the Andros Astronema story from In Space. And the minute they said that Dylan had a sister, I knew exactly where this was going. And I wish that they proved me wrong and had put a twist on it somewhere, but they didn't. It was the exact same thing, event for event. And it made the whole subplot really unexciting because I knew exactly what was going to happen, and what I knew was going to happen did happen. So that's a missed opportunity that they could have surprised everybody with that. And then to the whole Dylan being taken over by the virus thing, they could have done something really good with this coinciding with the Tanaya thing. Have him get taken over, let him become evil. Let Ziggy or something cure her. She wants to be the one to help Dylan's virus get cured. She ends up dying in the process of trying to heal Dylan. Dylan gets healed. Now he has a what's the word I'm thinking? A grudge against Vengex, because his whole reason was trying to find out things about his past. It seemed like all the other Rangers were trying to kill Vengex. He didn't seem to care about Vengex too much. Now he has a grudge against Vengex. I think that would have made the ending and all that build up for those two stories to hit a crossing climax that would have added a lot more of emotion to this season, which I think is something that this season kind of lacked. Was any kind of exciting or dramatic build up that was really satisfying. I do think that the story season fell a bit flat in most areas, and it's a good concept. Like I said, the Dome City post-Armageddon robot empire. It's a really good setting, but I don't believe any of it because Vengex is a really stupid villain. Even Tanaya points this out sometimes, like, send in this drone and it'll end up destroying them. And she's like, what are you, stupid? Just let me do it. Send in a whole bunch of drones at once. It's overpower him. He's really stupid. It makes me question how the heck did he even take over the world in the first place, because he's really simple-minded and straightforward as a villain. And as for the city itself, along with the shield thing being a problem, the people inside the city are really calm for being the only people left on the planet. Like, outside those dome walls are the end of the world. So I'm just gonna go to the park with my kids and have a picnic and have a really happy time and all this pizzazz. Let's go have a party in the park. And seriously, why? It seems like there are only like a couple hundred people as actual military. The only thing I can think of is they have that much faith in the Rangers to protect them that they don't even bother to turn everybody into a big army. Because you are the last humans on Earth. Shouldn't all of you be like, get some kind of military training to defend yourselves or something? I feel like, and I'm going to go back to the thing with Ziggy being the mob, though. There's this one episode where Ziggy and Scott went to get groceries for the Rangers and Dr. K and everything, and the grocery store ends up getting robbed while they're there. Dude, I'm talking to the robbers here. Dude, what is stealing money from a grocery store going to do for you in this situation? Like, you all are the last humans here. You should be helping each other, not stealing from each other in a time of pure desperation. This makes you just look like a cold, heartless douchebag. And this goes to all the other mobsters. What is the point of the mob in a post-Armageddon dome city that holds the last of your kind? What does this personal gain do for you people? I don't believe the city is a post-apocalyptic city, because it doesn't feel like one. It feels like they just put everybody in there and like, okay, let's just go on with our lives. Like nothing happened, you know? There's nothing outside this dome that could possibly harm us. And I don't buy it. I really don't buy it. It feels like either no one cares or they completely forgot about what's happening here. It bugs me. Like, it really does bug me. Now for what I think is the highest point of the season, that's the characters. Scott's whole development is based around his father. His older brother was the commander of the Corinth Air Force, and he was like the perfect son. He died in the Battle of Corinth, and I think his dad doesn't see Scott as his older brother. He's the Red Ranger, though, and he's done all this stuff, and it takes him like almost the entire season to finally accept Scott as a true warrior. It takes him to save the entire world for him to even up the grounds with just becoming a perfect Air Force leader. Like, I think what Scott has done has really outgrown what his older brother did. His dad is just stubborn, though. It caused Scott to do some really stupid things and put the Rangers' lives at risk, but he ended up getting his daddy's attention. Flynn is kind of like us. Reads the comic books, wants to be a hero, wants to do good things for people, and he ends up going on like a journey around the world trying to be a good Samaritan, and he ends up getting the Ranger position for that. Summer was a girly girl, rich girl. I said girl enough times in that sentence, didn't I? And her whole thing changed when her butler, who saw a lot of good things in her, ended up dying in front of her. So she ended up turning from stubborn rich girl to helpful person because she knew that she was a better person than that. Ziggy didn't really develop as a character, but as a ranger, because like I said at the beginning, he was twitchy. He didn't fight. He twitched his arms all around and knocked grinders down that way. But he ended up turning into a better fighter as the season went on. I think it was his confidence grew too. This season is really Dylan's story for the most part because it focuses around his past and how it links to everything. I think Dr. K and Dylan are the two main characters in this season for that reason because they have a lot of ties to what's going on in the grand scheme of things. He ends up being a cold, heartless, smug douchebag at the beginning because he doesn't know himself, he doesn't trust anybody. He ends up turning into a kind-hearted, just bad boy at the end when after everything's all said and done. Dr. K was all straight business. This was military, fight to the death stuff, using the Rangers as weapons, didn't even address them by their own name, kept referring to them as Ranger Operator Series Red and stuff. But she ended up loosening up as the season went along because of realizing that Flynn's own creations would help, that Ziggy, even though not qualified to be a ranger, can be a hero, and all this stuff just put onto her made her realize that, maybe I should loosen up and be more friendly to everybody, and that's what happened. I think the characters are the real high point of the season. I said this already, because they develop, they're relatable. Flynn and Ziggy are the ones I can relate to the most because I'm a comic person. I've always wanted to be a hero like that myself, and I love helping people. And he reminds me from a mental standpoint. Ziggy reminds me from a physical standpoint. I'm not a strong person by any means. I'm a stick. I only weigh like 140 pounds, and he looks like he weighs less than me. He fights as good as I do, and he's got that socially awkward, bad luck Brian-esque feature to him, where nothing goes his way. He thinks he's all that, but he's not, and he makes me laugh. I love Ziggy. He's easily my favorite member of the RPM Rangers, and I love him for it. So, all in all, I think the second watch through of RPM really did this season some justice for me. But do I consider one of the best seasons in Power Rangers up there with the Space Rangers and the Time Force Rangers? No. No, 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 not even close. I think the season was at its strongest when it focused on the characters. The actual story itself was really lacking. I think that they could have done more with the whole Dylan turning into an evil Vengex robot thing. They could have put some twist on the Tanaya Dylan thing. And the city, the Dome City thing wasn't believable. The Shield thing, like I've explained in the second half of the season, brought up a lot of questions. And I don't, there's a lot of, the story itself, the construct of the story has problems. The setting and the atmosphere are great. The characters are great. The actual written story itself I have problems with. And I can't say that this is a great season. It's a good season, definitely. It's worth a watch, because it's, even though I have problems with the story, it's still a solid story. The only thing I would consider plot hole-ish would be the Shield thing, because now you got people coming in and entering however you wish. It's like, oh, look, Vengex coming in here. Open the door for him. Let him walk in. Oh, he wants to leave? Okay, you can leave. Bye, Vengex. See you tomorrow. I don't buy this at all. And I don't know if it would be considered plot hole or just lazy writing on their part, but it was questionable. And I feel like the story could have been a lot better, and if it was fully taken advantage of, I feel like the season could have been the best. But the story is lacking, but I think the setting, atmosphere, and character development makes up for the flaws of the story. But I don't think it's a top-notch season. It's not best Power Rangers season level material. I'm not buying it by any means. It's still a good season. It's a solid season. It's worth a watch, definitely. I would put it in like the middle, upper level seasons, maybe along the lines with like Lost Galaxy. It does good things right, and it does a lot of things wrong to balance it. It's not great, it's just good. I know a lot of people love RPM. I've seen many people put it up there as the best season, or alongside In Space as the best season. I don't buy it. I don't see it. I think the story isn't worthy enough to be put up there with the best seasons. Though, maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm overlooking something, or maybe it's just me. But that's just how I feel about RPM. I was disappointed with all the hype this season was getting from my friends who told me to watch this season. And I said the same thing about Die Ranger, but Die Ranger I actually think is a bad season. RPM, I think it's a season of missed opportunities. Which is disappointing because it was a really good season on paper, executed bad on screen. That's how I'm going to leave RPM, or Power Rangers rotations per minute. I think RPM is supposed to stand for Racing Performance Machines, actually, which would make more sense because Power Rangers rotations per minute does not sound very intimidating whatsoever. Voice is starting to cut out, man. I'm going to have to get some water. So, yeah. So I'm going to leave RPM. It's an average season for me. There's a lot of things I like, a lot of things that I don't like, and things that I wish they had done differently. Still worth a watch, though. So next, what are we going to do next? Yes. Space Patrol Delta, the season that my brother loves oh so much. And a season that actually the one Disney season that I've been really wanting to see more than the others. Because, like I said, I've seen the first 12 episodes of the season. I'm going to start over from the beginning anyway and watch it from beginning to end. And I really, really liked the season. It got me hooked really fast. Something that RPM couldn't do was catch my attention with something interesting. Because, like I said, the story was really bland, flat, had no hook for me. SPD has a hook. So I'm really excited to finish the season, watch it, and that's what we'll be doing next. We'll be jumping a little bit into the future, talking about Space Patrol Delta. Okay, stop recording, please. Stop.